So I'd like to commend today the first of the series of transparencies, which actually has a lot to do with philosophy of science. What are the basic assumptions behind science, and what are the basic assumptions that might not be completely right, and why is it interesting then to go to an understanding of complexity. So before we can go into what complexity is and what does it mean, it's interesting to have a little discussion about philosophy of science. Complexity is based on a holistic management approach, on a holistic understanding of the world. And what does mean holistic? Many definitions. The one that I like to use is the one of Ken Wilber, an American philosopher journalist, and he describes a holistic approach on two dichotomies. One dichotomy between interior, exterior, one dichotomy between individual and collective. And what he says is, if you want to understand whatever is alive, then you'll have to understand those four quadrants. And I'll briefly describe those four quadrants that you see on your transparency. If you start in the upper right corner, you have the exterior individual quadrant that deals with what we call truth. It's external, it is independent of all the rest. So you want to examine your stomach hurts, you think your stomach is an isolated organ, you're going to examine it, and you do as if it is no part of any wider body. Second quadrant, right under, is what he calls functional fit. It is still exterior, but it is collective. It is your stomach in combination with the other organs. So you don't just examine the stomach, you understand that the stomach is part of an interaction of a number of organs. Then there's a whole interior side, the left side of the diagram, which we often ignore. And the interior collective one, the down left quadrant, the we quadrant as he calls it, is what we call the cultural quadrant. What do we share? What are our values? What is the magic? What are the meats that we share? Be that in a country, be that in a language, be that in a company. And the last quadrant is the upper left one, which is interior, still of course, and again individual, which has everything to do with the emotions. And again, if I may use the metaphor of health, there are indeed cultures that make more healthy or more sick than other cultures, and it is equally known that the individual's mental, the emotions, etc., can make sick or can feel you very happy despite the fact that you are sick. If you translate all that to managerial interpretation, you get to the next slide, you see again the same dichotomy, and there we say if you want to holistically understand a company, you have to start by what are the values that this company wants to realize. And in our case, of course, we've chosen a set of so-called Euro-Mediterranean values, but any company can choose any values of the world. It is something that we share, that we want to go for, that as a company are ours. Some examples, Euro-Mediterranean ones, is diversity as creative force, humanism, relativism. We accept that the world is complex, is ever and always changing. We think we have a social responsibility in the world, etc., etc. These are a number of values. Every company should start from the idea, which are the values I would like to realize. From values, you go to personal development. A value is never made by a machine, a value is made by a person. So therefore, people, be it in a curriculum, be it in a company, are crucially important. And personal development, of course, has everything to do with self-motivation, involvement, responsibility, respect, etc. Hence, if you would like the company to realize values, you'll have to pay attention to the people and to the development of the people that are going to realize those values. Only then you can move to the right upper quadrant, which is the outside quadrant, where you can start doing what I like to call your mechanistic organization, in which you have finance, control, production, logistics, etc., all in order to realize your values, not just in the blue, since the other companies do not know why you organize the way I organize. Very simply, since I would like to realize the values I would like to realize. And as a consequence comes almost automatically the last quadrant, which is what I like to call the systemic management approach, in which you have automatically, if you choose that path, you have a longer term vision, you have responsibility, you have ethics, you have knowledge, you have learning, etc. Now, that is a different view, an epistemologically and ontologically different view of the world, and that allows to do different things. Now, I often use the metaphor of flatland, the little booklet of Edwin Abbott. If you imagine for a minute that you live in a flat world, two-dimensional world, even if there are squares and circles and rectangles in that flat world, you will not see them. Everything appears to be a line. So your observation correctly shows you a line, but in reality there are indeed squares and circles, etc. Hence, if you would like to see those squares and circles, the only way to do that is to get out of flatland, out of the two dimensions, and move in the third dimension. You can never understand a new paradigm if you stay within the old paradigm. If we would have continued to believe that all the planets turned around the world, we would never have been able to understand that all the planets turned around the sun, the world included, right? That means that you have to leave apart, you have to stop the assumptions that you've been making for years, which is if you want to, something which is often given by culture, by education, by whatever. If you would like to see the squares in flatland, and that are indeed there, you'll have to be willing to grow over the two dimensions and move into a new paradigm. A poem that you probably have seen and heard, which I think nicely describes that. Wonder your footprints are the path and nothing more. Wonder there is no path. It is created as you walk. By walking you make the path before you, and when you look behind you see the path which after you will not be trod again. Wonder there is no path but the ripples on the waters. Actually, this poem is a nice description of the constructivist ontology. There is no path, there is nothing, you just made your path while walking. And we do that all together in a company, as individuals, in your private life, etc. That is an illustration, if you want to, that's a metaphor for one of the two major ontologies, and I'll get back to that in a minute. What's an ontology? What's an epistemology? An epistemology is your understanding, your acceptance of what truth is and how you prove truth. And that, of course, fits within a larger picture, which I like to call an ontology, which is what should exist in order for your epistemology to be true. So if you believe, if you would like to use quantitative methods in order to validate your research, that only works if you presume, if your assumption behind that is that the world indeed is objective, rational and measurable. If you would like to use quantitative methods, but you would not accept that the world is measurable, then you're losing, obviously, your time. So, on the other hand, the fact the rational reductionist view of the world is an ontology. And there's quite a lot of people, I would even say most probably a majority of people, that think that the world is reductionist and rational. So you can deconstruct it and you take little separate parts, and if you understand all those separate parts and you bring them back together, you understand the whole, which of course clearly, according to others, is not true. If you believe in that ontology, if you believe in that rational ontology, then you would use measurement, you would use quantitative data. If, however, you believe that the world is not deconstructible and that the world is a whole and that the world is something which is constructed while you're progressing, then you'll have to adapt your research methods, you have to adapt your epistemology in order to understand that constructivist ontology. So ontology is the wider world view that you accept, and it's an acceptance. Nothing is true, everybody accepts his own ontology. And then within each ontology there is a specific